Brisket is the king of barbecue, and generally speaking, it's best kept simple. But I recently marinated a whole brisket for 24 hours, and the result was incredible. So I wanted to see what would happen if we did an extremely long marinade of 15 days. So we'll be comparing the bark, flavor, and tenderness to a traditionally cooked brisket. Now, I have no idea how this is gonna turn out. Honestly, it's looking a little bit funky, kind of green, but either way, let's get started. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about our brisket. This here is a whole packer brisket, which means it still has both muscles attached. We have the thicker point right here, and the thinner, more lean flat right here. And we're just gonna remove it from the package, making sure not to slice through meat and only that fat. I like to keep trimming brisket simple, and there's 3 main steps that I stick to. The first is removing any thick, hard fat. So you'll find a lot of this specifically on the point section. I do tend to remove more fat. Since this side is extremely fatty, we really don't need as much. And as you can see, we're exposing some of this incredible marbling. This is just a choice grade brisket, so nothing crazy, but it still looks incredible. And I'm just gonna flip it over. Here you can see we have this really thick, hard piece of fat. I'm just gonna remove most of it. And while we're on this side, I'm also gonna remove some of this fat and silver skin from the flat. Do your best not to cut into the meat too much. And also keep in mind, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. I'm just trying to remove as much as possible. Okay, the next step is leaving a 1/4 inch of fat, specifically on this flat side. As I mentioned, the flat is more lean, so we do want some nice fat to protect it. However, too much and it won't render, and the final product just won't be great. And it can be a little bit hard to judge, but do your best to not cut through to the meat itself. If you do, it really isn't a huge deal, just take your time with it. And having a sharp knife as well as a nice cold brisket makes this a lot easier. Okay, now the final step here is to visualize making it aerodynamic. So you might be wondering what exactly that means, but really all I'm doing is trying to round out all of the sides, as we want that smoke to flow through evenly. Also, feel free to go heavier with the trimming on this flat side. It tends to dry out a lot more, and we can use these trimmings for other things like burgers or sausages. Even an area like this where the flat is just completely exposed off the brisket, I'm gonna actually remove pretty much the whole thing. And I know it seems like a lot, but again, we're gonna save these for burgers. And we're left with a perfectly trimmed up brisket. Let's make that marinade. So the first thing we'll need for our marinade are some chipotles in adobo. Oh, he thinks it's cat food. And every time I open up chipotles in adobo, my cat Tibby thinks he's getting cat food, which is not the case. That's not for you, Tibby. These things are honestly so underrated and are gonna give a nice smoky and spicy kick. Next up, just a few cloves of garlic. This is gonna give it some nice texture and great flavor. And it's very simple from here, just a 1/2 cup of bourbon, 1/2 cup of soy sauce, 1/2 cup of maple syrup, 1/2 cup of Dijon, a couple tablespoons of Worcestershire, and just give it a nice mix. All right, and all that's left to do is put our meat in a marinating bag, cover it in the marinade, which I've actually done exactly 15 days ago. And here we are. And here she is. I really don't know what to expect with this thing, but let's open it up. So one thing to note is that I did season this before marinating with salt. So combined with that soy sauce, there is a good amount of salt in this brisket. So to me, it's almost like it's been cured or brined for these full 15 days, kind of similar to pastrami. So I'm really interested to see how that affects the final product. As you can see, it seems like a lot of that marinade has actually been infused into the meat. That's pretty crazy. So the first thing I noticed is that it still smells really good. And let's check this thing out though. So as you can see here, it's almost like the meat is waterlogged. It's just like totally filled up with that marinade. And just because I'm interested, I'm actually gonna take a quick slice from right here, just to see if we can see how much that marinade penetrated. This is actually super interesting to me. The inside is still that really nice red color, and it seems like the marinade itself didn't go super deep. But we'll have to see at the end how far that flavor actually penetrated. Okay, so we have our 15-day marinated brisket and our control brisket. For this one over here, we're gonna use a Texas style brisket rub. It's really just salt and pepper, maybe some garlic and things like that. And I'm not using a binder today, we're just gonna season the entire thing. Now this is a pretty big piece of meat, so no need to go shy on the seasoning. Just make sure it's a nice even coat. And don't forget to get those sides as well as the back. Both our briskets are looking good, let's get them on the grill. I just got a brand new grill and it's time to put it to use. And of course, we're smoking over applewood, low and slow. Okay, our briskets are on the grill and we have probably 12 to 16 hours ahead of us of cooking. So we're gonna quickly make some Yorkshire puddings. They are shockingly easy to make and they're just so puffy and delicious. And we're just gonna start with 4 large eggs. Next we have 150 grams of all-purpose flour, 175 grams of whole milk, 25 grams of water, and just a pinch of salt. And now we're just gonna whisk this up into a nice batter. And our batter is nice and smooth. Now, if you guys know me, you know I know nothing about baking. This is a recipe I got from one of my inspirations, Kenji Lopez. He recommends to put this in the fridge overnight to cool down. You can do it for 30 minutes, but a cool batter is beneficial. We got no room, boys. I don't know what to do here. All right, we're gonna put it in the dryager and I'll see you in about 12 hours. Okay, and just like that, it's been 12 hours. Our batter is nice and chilled. Let's put these together. So the first thing we need to do is add some fat to our baking tins. This is Wagyu beef fat, but feel free to use lard or like vegetable oil, anything like that. Probably about 1/4 cup for 6 tins. And now we're just gonna pop this in the oven at 450 for about 10 minutes to preheat. Now we're just gonna fill these up about half of the way. Now we're just gonna immediately get these back in. And just like that, our Yorkshire puddings are complete. Next time I'll use a little bit less fat, but these things still came out absolutely incredible. A nice crunch on the outside and just so fluffy on the inside. As much as I would love to eat all these right now, I believe our brisket is ready for the wrap. Wrapping the brisket is gonna speed up the cooking process while keeping it juicy. And I only wrap once the color looks right, because once wrapped, the bark will not continue to darken. This is usually around 170 to 180 internal, and these look perfect. For a little extra flavor and juiciness, I'm just adding some beef tallow on top of the brisket, then wrapping up our present nice and tight with some butcher's paper. Alternatively, feel free to use tinfoil, but since the butcher's paper is more breathable, it tends to preserve the bark best, and get them back on the grill to finish cooking until 203F internal. Okay, and here they are. 15 days of marinating, 14 hours of cooking, 8 hours of resting, surrounded by blankets in a cooler. These briskets got more sleep than me last night. Let's open them up. Still very warm to the touch. After all of our hard work, it's time to open up our briskets. And this to me is always the most exciting part of barbecue. You spend literally days worth of time and finally get to see how it turns out. They both felt very tender, but I noticed that the bark on the marinated brisket was a lot less consistent than the control. This was sort of surprising, as I figured the sugar in the marinade would have led to better caramelization. And even after an 8-hour rest, notice how the internal temperature was still at 150F, which is ideal for slicing. And here you can really see that inconsistency in the bark on the marinated briskets versus the control, which looked absolutely perfect. Also for reference, this was filmed at 8 o'clock in the morning, but I was still absolutely pumped to slice into these things. All right, both briskets look absolutely incredible. It's time to slice them up and see what a 15-day marinated brisket tastes like. Starting with the control brisket. And man, this thing looked unbelievably juicy. Something I learned firsthand in this experiment is how important it is to rest a brisket properly. Usually when making briskets, I'm kind of in a rush and only let it rest for like an hour, but the long rest this time made a huge difference. Always try to rest at least 2 hours, but if you have the time, 8 to 10 hours in a cooler will give you the best results possible. Next up, I sliced into the marinated brisket and once again looked amazing. Usually the leaner flat is really difficult to keep juicy, but as you can see, it was straight up dripping. All of the fat on the fattier point was fully rendered, and it was nearly falling apart just holding it. All that was left to do was taste and see if marinating a brisket for 15 whole days is actually worth it. All right, time to eat. Starting with a piece of that flat from the control. This is honestly probably one of the best briskets I've ever cooked. Bark, juiciness, that smoke flavor is close to a 10 out of 10. Of course, gotta try some of that point with the Yorkshire pudding. It's actually a pretty good match. But how does it compare to a 15-day marinated brisket. I honestly wasn't sure if this was even gonna be edible, but we'll see. When it comes to flavor, I'd say a little bit more complex because of all those marinade ingredients. I will say the smoke flavor on this one is a lot less than the Control, and it's also a bit less tender and juicy. Is it a better flavor than the Control? Probably not. Still very delicious. So to sum it all up, in my opinion, brisket is best kept simple. All you really need is the meat, salt, pepper, and the smoke. However, can you marinate a brisket for 15 hours? And is it good? Absolutely. I really hope you enjoy this experiment. Let me know down in the comments what you want to see me cook next, and I'll see you next time.